Well, it's Ramadan. It is also Lent. The topic of our discussion, as Ahmed was talking about, was can refraining from bread lead to spiritual growth? I find if I skip a meal, I get incredibly angry. So, do you have a different perspective? Is Lent important to you? And are you a yes/no answer to that question?
I have to apologise to the Archbishop.
He's not listening. He's a good Archbishop.
I don't go to church every Sunday. The older I get, the less I turn up to the church.
Yes.
But what I find is that it becomes a very important part of my compass.
Right.
And people who work with me and who I have the opportunity to work with in this role as the chair of the Victorian Multicultural Commission know that I am very transparent. And I see the things that we do as part of humanity and as part of wanting everybody to have that equal place in our society. And faith does guide a lot of that sort of that compass for me in the law.
Okay.
And so it is not necessarily a yes or a no, but it is a really important practice. My son does go to a Catholic school, and then he does go to church every Sunday.
Okay, Susan, Ramadan. How's the Ramadan experience for you?
It's beautiful, and I think people who aren't Muslim or don't participate in Ramadan, that can sound like such a strange answer because they think, but how can you enjoy something when you just, like you said, you're hangry? You know, we fast from dawn until after sunset. It's for 30 days. It's a marathon, but it's a spiritual discipline. And I think for me, what is, you ask the question, how does refraining from bread increase?
Well, in your case, everything.
Everything, including water.
Yeah.
I think what it shows me is that, like, Ramadan is like a spiritual boot camp. And it shows me how for the other 11 months of the year, I have fed my body and starved my soul. And Ramadan shows me what it's like when I actually feed my soul and refrain from the body. And it shows me actually how my soul has probably been starving all this time. Because in Ramadan, the hunger and thirst is not the point. We're actually told if all you get out of Ramadan is hunger and thirst, you may as well have not fasted.
So what is the point?
The point is the hunger and thirst is the vehicle for spiritual growth. That when we experience that discomfort, which in society today, how rarely we feel discomfort. We're in an instant gratification society. If I'm hungry, I have something to eat. If I'm thirsty, I have a drink. If I have a headache, I'll take a tablet. We never sit with discomfort. But if we can learn to sit with that, on the other side of that is the spiritual growth. And I guess that's why every spiritual tradition does have a practice of fasting. You look at them all, the Jewish tradition obviously does, Christians have Lent, all of them have this practice. And I think there's a reason for that. There's a wisdom that there is a lot of growth in fasting.
You're nodding there, Viv.
Yes. She's going back to church this Sunday.
1 week left, it's still not too late to give up sugar. I think instant gratification, which you mentioned, Susan, is very true, but it's triply so for our younger generation. We had a little insurrection there in the middle where the lolly tray got upset and there was a pile on. So younger people, children, expect everything now even quicker than our generation. You have children. Are they? What are their reflections as far as you understand them about the concept of Ramadan or even Lent?
Yeah, well, I mean, both my kids fast. They're teenagers, so young children don't have to fast.
Yeah.
And my kids both do fast. They're, like I said, they're teenagers, and I've always wanted for them. Obviously, as parents, I don't need to tell any parent here. Of course, we want our children to take the faith that we have because every parent wants their children to have their values. But also, particularly, I suppose, as a convert, I really want and I know my children's faith journey needs to be their own. Like, I cannot enforce that. I can encourage and recommend and hope, but it has to be their own. And so I've watched both of my kids find their own way with their faith. As human nature, in Islam we say that the path is straight, but it's very wide. It's not a narrow path. And so there's lots of different ways to be Muslim. And I've enjoyed watching my kids find their own way, and I'm sure they will continue to do that. They both do fast Ramadan. My youngest son, for example, plays a ridiculous amount of soccer, and so it's hard.
Very hard.
He was at the gym for 2 hours yesterday, like a nutcase. And I'm like, what are you doing? You're fasting. But he's 16, and that's what matters to him, and he's worried about losing muscle, and so off he went. And
Okay.
so,
The
you
will
know,
is there.
Yeah, there is. And
So
they'll find
my
their
son
way.
reminded me about Lent, about Ash Wednesday, and about fasting.
Did he announce that he'd given up chocolate or sugar or
He only
Red
followed
Bull?
what Mum put on the table, but he did remind us about that.
Okay.
He's a bit more religious.
He
than
sounds
I
very
am.
pious. Mia, you are young yourself. You are reporting on the Jewish community. Have you got any observations about whether there is a divide between the generations? Because we hear a lot about how younger generations want to be individual, and the idea of community or a group worship situation is perhaps less relevant to them. Have you found that to be the case in your reporting?
Well, I'm working at like a grassroots level, so I'm speaking to young people in the community every day, and I'm speaking to older people in the community every day. And I think that sometimes the older generation is worried that, that maybe their kids are losing their faith. But from what I've seen at least, is that maybe they're practicing differently, maybe it looks different, but it's still very much there and important to them. So I've spoken to so many university students recently, and maybe there is a disconnect in how it looks, but they are just as passionate about their Judaism as anyone can be. They, even in the face of anti-Semitism on campus, which is a huge problem at the moment, they are not backing down. They're still so proud of who they are, and they're still wanting to be openly Jewish, and it's something that I think that the community as a whole can be proud of, and I don't think that there is a need to worry too much that Jewish people are losing that connection.
Okay. Viv, you send your son to a Catholic school. You've already intimated that he has raised a few issues with you that you might not be as onto as him. What would your observations be about a generational divide and how that makes an approach to faith differ?
I think, for me, the way I see young people, certainly in the Catholic faith, is that there are different ways that they come together, they congregate. And just because they don't go to church on a Sunday, it doesn't mean that they don't believe in their faith. They exercise and provide that experience differently. What I do notice too is that whatever faith that young people have, their appreciation of other faiths is far more than, say, the first generation or the older generation have about another faith. They are far more willing to learn, willing to accept, willing to listen, and willing to actually appreciate the faith, other faiths. And I think they also know, probably better than I do, that underlying each and every religion is about humanity and is about goodness. And that, I think, is the way, is how they experience, and that they show their faith and their belief rather than necessarily doing that in such a traditional way.
Well, it sounds like they're doing that more successfully than the older generation. Susan, your children are educated. Did you send them to a regular high school, or did you send them to a Muslim school?
No.
Was that choice important to you?
Well, my eldest actually went to Wesley, which is a Uniting Church school.
Yes.
And it was a fantastic experience. It was a wonderful experience. So no, neither of my kids went to or go to Muslim schools. And I guess in the end we felt that we found the schools that were best for both our kids. We also really wanted to, my husband and I wanted to be their main source of religious education. They both went to a Muslim Saturday school for many, many years. So they had that opportunity to learn about the faith there and make Muslim friends. But
You made them go to school on a 6th day.
we did, yeah, exactly. I just said, look, we'll pay for your psychologist. You can complain to us about that. But this is what you're just going to have to hate us for it. So yeah, they went on a Saturday morning as well for Muslim school.
Okay.